I love PlayStation. Like, I really love PlayStation. These two little plastic boxes right here shaped my entire childhood and are the reason why I'm making these stupid little videos today. Some of the fondest memories I have is just staying up till 4 a.m. playing Battlefront 2 with the homies. This was back in the days when you can go to Walmart and break your neck trying out game demos on their 12-inch screen and also buy a fish for some reason. Like many people around my age, the PS2 was the first console I was introduced to as a child. This little rigid plastic box had such a creepy aura around it. The eeriness of hearing that startup screen right before seeing my mom play Silent Hill 3 in the living room scaring the shit out of me. Thanks, Mom. But I couldn't look away. From the moment I laid eyes on that system, I was in love. Like, they just made gaming so cool and special and unique, you know? They challenged the way your grandma, that just calls everything Mario, it challenged the way she thought about games as a medium. I mean, the catalog on the first 3 consoles were just insane. Just innovative masterpieces, back-to-back bangers. You know, if you showed them to a Victorian-era child, it would literally melt his brain. With the recent release of Astrobot, a fantastic celebration in PlayStation's history, it really got me thinking just how much of a goldmine PlayStation has across their 30-year history. And you'd think with how many banger franchises they have, at least some of them would stand the test of time. But a lot of them are just stranded on old hardware with no hope of ever coming back. Abandoned. Exiled. Forsaken, if you will. No, not that one. There are masterpiece games from the PS1 and PS2 just begging for some sort of revival, but unplayable on PS5 or just a dingy little PS Plus premium port. As for the PS3 classics, you can play them, but you have to Don't use PS Plus streaming. Sadly, the majority of these franchises are just rotting underground as simply relics of the past. In this era of shameless nostalgia bait, easy cash grab remakes and reboot sequels, you'd think Sony would have the mind to, spray them down with some Febreze, tap them on the butt and get them in the game, coach. But nope. Guys, I said older games, guys. It's been a wild generation of it's Jovers and we're so backs that it really had me thinking how fun the platform was back in the day. And since I just went on a binge of playing some classic PS3 games with some kinda, not really, halfway, sort of, somewhat, a little bit illegal ways to play, I decided to exhume and reminisce on some of PlayStation's best IPs with no hope of coming back. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Bloodborne. Dude, Bloodborne is just a complete enigma. Like, it is so universally loved by everyone in the PlayStation community, and we have been desperately asking for something in this game. Yet PlayStation will barely even acknowledge it. Hell, we can't even get so much as a 60 FPS patch on PS5. Oh, God! The gothic, old English atmosphere just perfectly blends with PlayStation's weird, enigmatic nature of just never talking and being very mysterious. Look, okay, I fucking hate Souls games, okay? I can't stand them. I refuse to get good. I don't like raging at a game, okay? But even I can admit that Bloodborne is a fantastic game. Bloodborne combat makes Souls combat, actually fun.
Freaky bro.
It's got that early Souls vibe where they just kind of throw you in and don't give you anything to work with. And for the losers like me that aren't good enough to finish the game on their own, you can just summon, and let a guy that finished the game 86 times hit a boss while you're just kicking back, just waiting. PlayStation fans are so thirsty for Bloodborne content that they just started taking it upon themselves. Like, one guy is just remaking Bloodborne but in PS1 graphics. Modders for RPCS4 are desperately trying to get Bloodborne's fucking spaghetti code to work for PC. Hell, really the only time PlayStation acknowledged Bloodborne is when someone literally made a kart racer ripoff called Nightmare Kart to keep it legally distinct. Other than cock teasing us with the Bloodborne skin and Astrobot, nobody really knows why PlayStation just refuses to acknowledge this game. Maybe they just don't see the value in it, even though Souls games are at their absolute peak right now, and fans are literally ripping off your IP just to have more of it. Maybe it's just another one of Sony's one-and-done IPs that they're notorious for. Hell, it could even be as simple as FromSoft has first right of refusal to make anything of it. Luckily, the game is only 9 years old, and it's playable on modern hardware. So there's a sliver of copium that it'll come back in some way, shape, or form in the future. I mean, there's been rumors and leaks about it coming back for fucking years with nothing.
Nobody wants to tell the truth.
Now, if Bloodborne would have released on PS3, we would have never heard from that shit ever again. That console has some of the best games ever to grace this earth trapped on it. One of which being Infamous, a certified hood classic on the PS3. You want to talk about some fucking sick anti-hero edgelord shit? Infamous is right up your alley, baby. Before Sucker Punch was making weeb simulators, they were making some ultra swag, edgy shit in Infamous. It was in that really weird era of superhero games where they were starting to become more than movie tie-ins, and they were also starting to become like more for teenagers. So we actually started to get some bangers like Batman Arkham Asylum, fucking Prototype, but it wasn't just a good game because of the edgy vibe that every other game in the 2010s had. It was a legitimately good and unique take on superhero video games. It's a perfect representation of a comic book turned into a video game. It's got these nice, cool comic panels in the cutscenes. It's got clear distinctions of good versus evil. It was like a third-person shooter, but the shooting was fucking lightning attacks from your hands, and your grenades were like fucking lightning grenades. It was awesome. And the traversal, oh dude, the traversal was like Spider-Man 2 levels of fun. It had snap-on parkour mechanics, so it makes it super fluid and easy to make Cole where he wants to go. But it also had superhero sensibilities where Cole had like super speed, super strength. You know, he had crazy hang time on his jumps. Infamous was really different, man, because it was created with this concept of like, if you were just dropped into a world and suddenly given superpowers, would you use for powers? For good or evil? And yeah, I fucking use for evil. I don't give a shit. I do not use my power responsibly at all. The city will constantly turn against you for doing good deeds, and the rewards for being evil are even better, and Cole looks cooler. So of course I'm gonna be fucking evil the whole game. The karma system is actually taken into account very well. It doesn't just regulate good and evil to, yeah, well, you know, you're evil and, you know, you stole a bunch of shit, but nobody really cares, you know?
Patrolling the Mojave almost makes you wish for a nuclear winter.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, man. Cole's powers, his appearance, the look of Empire City, like it all changes based on your actions. The first two games were absolute classics, but after the kind of mid Infamous Second Son, Sucker Punch just kind of dropped the franchise and went to make Ghost of Tsushima, which, I mean, was a good decision in my opinion. You know, Ghost of Tsushima is easily the best game on PS4, but it's at the cost of Infamous just completely dropping dead. And seeing as how we can't even get so much as a port, it's effectively stranded on ancient hardware. But here's the kicker, Infamous isn't even a fraction of the great PS3 games that are stranded on that console. From crappy little digital games like Pain and Fat Princess, which were god tier games when I was a kid.
That's called motherfucking boy! You know nothing about that!
All the way to AAA masterpieces. One of which being Killzone. It was actually one of the first games to be labeled a Halo killer, right behind Haze, which... yeah, we're not gonna talk about Haze. The funny thing is, Killzone was nothing like Halo. It was more like the fucking gritty, ultra-violent antithesis of it. There were no alien weapons, and there weren't fucking booster packs and drones like Advanced Warfare. It really was a bleak interpretation of how war would break out on an intergalactic scale. It was futuristic sci-fi, but it wasn't fucking annoying about it. By 2011, with Killzone 3, futuristic FPS games were still fairly uncommon, as everyone was riding the wave of modern FPS games. Futuristic hits like Black Ops 2 hadn't even come out yet. Oh my god, the game's not even fucking futuristic anymore, holy shit. There's entire planets worth of stories to be told in Killzone. But with Killzone Shadowfall on the PS4 flopping as hard as it did, Guerrilla traded in their FPS expertise to become yet another third-person action-adventure studio. But Sony won't even put it on PS Plus streaming. So unless you actually have a PS3 or, there's no way to play it. It's the same sad story with Resistance, man. While Killzone took on this, gritty, ultra dark sci-fi war, Resistance brought an alternate like 1950s if aliens attacked Earth. It was cool as shit. But nonetheless, great trilogy of games made by an ultra talented studio that just got regulated to, you guessed it, third-person, single-player action games. I'm starting to notice a trend here. The Insomniac we knew could make any type of game. They were making shooters, platformers, action games, VR games, and now they're just gonna make fucking Marvel dog shit for like the next 10 years. There's just so much trending on PS3 that we'll just never see again, sadly. And the PS3 in general is just a very peculiar console. It seems like PlayStation just ignores it way more than any of the other systems, which is really sad to see, because it's a system that I grew up on. It's a system that I love. Now, the console that is constantly celebrated is the PlayStation 2. The fucking LeBron of consoles, okay? The Barry Bonds of consoles, if you will. Every game in the catalog, just smasher after smasher, no matter what. It was like fucking PS2 was on Adderall. It was a groundbreaking console, It took the world by the throat and said, video games aren't just for fucking kids anymore. And Jak and Daxter was a reflection of that change. Jak and Daxter was a very, very early PS2 game that was absolutely groundbreaking back in the day. After Naughty Dog had Crash just ripped right from under them, Jak became the spiritual successor, and they just went balls to the wall with it, defining platformers for that generation. Like, this game had not a single loading screen with it in the open world in 2001. No. It was just a complete masterclass of a platformer, you know, a collectathon of the purest form. And, you know, 20 years later, it still stands out as a game that comes as close to perfect as it can possibly be. But it was just missing one key component back then that defined the PS2's aesthetic. It was a little too childish. You see, by the time the PS2 came out in 2000, the market had started to grow up a little bit. You know, people that were playing video games weren't kids anymore. They were starting to become edgy teens and young adults. The PS2 commercials felt like surrealist art, Lynchian in their weirdness, barely even talking about the console. But that's why they worked. It showcased Sony's artful and bold nature of breaking boundaries and taking risks. Everywhere you looked, it was screaming from the rooftops that it was different. And it was made specifically for you. You fucking 17-year-old listening to Korn at the skate park with your Jinko jeans and wallet chain and frost-tipped spikes. The PS2 commanded that it was firmly for an older audience. The audience was growing up, so the games had to grow up as well. And Jak 2 reflected that. Naughty Dog took a bold step in turning Jak 2 into a GTA 3 clone, adding steampunk guns and cars and even a skate park. Jak 1 was a game you played, you know, as a wee little boy. And Jak 2 was a game you played when you were a cool kid in high school, you know, going through a rap rock phase. But the PS2 didn't just bring cool aesthetics. It also brought a fuck ton of innovation and revolutionized multiplayer gaming on consoles with the release of SOCOM in 2002. Halo LAN parties with the boys was revolutionary, but SOCOM took it a step further and made that multiplayer fully online, baby. Like, it's really funny how much of a forgotten franchise SOCOM was because it was revolutionary. Like, without SOCOM, we wouldn't have gotten Battlefield, you know, we wouldn't have gotten Call of Duty Online. We wouldn't have gotten every game in the PS3 generation shoehorning a multiplayer mode into it. Which, you know, now that I think about it, that's probably not such a bad thing. Like, seriously, SOCOM opened the floodgates for every developer in the industry to go like, holy shit, we can do that? Zipper Interactive kind of went out like an old dog. SOCOM just couldn't keep up with the rapidly evolving multiplayer landscape. As Call of Duty and Battlefield started to dominate, SOCOM felt increasingly outdated. After basically inventing what we now know as multiplayer shooters, SOCOM just felt more like a relic of the past. The PS2 was also a horror maestro, building a catalog of horror games that no console could even come close to. Silent Hill thrived, having one of the greatest runs in horror game history. Resident Evil was comfortably in first place as the GOAT horror title, but the one that really stood out to me back in the day was Kiichiro Toyama's Siren. Even the fucking disc on this bad boy gave me nightmares, bro. The box art was terrifying. In my opinion, Siren blew Silent Hill out the water in terms of fear factor. Now, it's not the most well-built game. I'm just gonna say that up front. It has ultra clunky combat and movement. The puzzles are insanely complicated to the point of impossible. Like, it's pretty fucking amazing how people were able to complete this game back in the day without a guide or anything. The game just kind of throws you into the world and just says, figure it out. Oh, buddy, you thought the fucking apartments in Silent Hill were obtuse? You haven't seen anything yet with this fucking game. There's some unique mechanics in the game like sight jacking, which allows you to like view the camera from the enemy's perspective. But honestly, it's the atmosphere and tone of the world that makes it what it is. Like, it's, even to this day, it's one of the only horror games that I'm actually scared of. The technological limitations of the game only serve to help the creepy, rural, cobbled together feeling of this game, where its dreamlike, uncanny valley aesthetic contributed to the feeling of being trapped in an actual nightmare. Siren used like real superimposed faces on their models, so it's already like super creepy from that alone. Like, that just looks weird in and of itself. And then you put that into the Shibito design of like their bleeding red eyes and their fucking pale white skin, and it's premium nightmare fuel. The cutscenes are rendered to look like this old-timey film with a 16 FPS rendering and a shaky camera and unstable lighting, further selling the idea that Hanuta Village is like this otherworldly place of just pure evil. It's a fresh take on what a zombie game would look like if it focused on atmosphere and plopped it into a Silent Hill style world. You know, I hate to be the guy that says that, but it really is just one of those games where you had to be there to understand. Hey, get out of here. It's just sitting there, ripe for a Resident Evil 2 style remake. But since Toyama no longer works at Sony, it's highly unlikely Siren will ever come back. He certainly earned his place on the Mount Rushmore of PlayStation creators. and his games serve as a relic of one of PlayStation's greatest eras of gaming. So, going back just a little bit further to the ancient times of 1999, we come across yet another dead IP, which was so important for Sony at the time that it's honestly kind of disrespectful that it hasn't come back in any way. Now, this was the infancy of PlayStation, okay? We're in the 90s. Nobody really knew what the fuck was going on at any given moment. Studios were just kind of throwing shit at the wall and seeing what stuck. One of which was the highly influential Siphon Filter. It was one of the earliest examples of a stealth action shooter along with Metal Gear Solid. And while MGS went for a more polished fixed camera experience, Siphon Filter just went full on third person shooter mode. There was like warped textures since the PS1 had such wonky rendering, and moving Gabe Logan around is like trying to fucking push a shopping cart around with 3 broken wheels. And you gotta remember, this is the PS1, right? So there were no analog sticks, okay? To move around, you had to use the D-pad, which also served as a camera. To strafe was R1 and L1, to crouch was X, and to shoot was like fucking square or something. Definitely a product of its time. But it pioneered open-ended combat. The game just kind of plopped you into a world and was like, go through it however you want to do it. You can painstakingly sneak around and headshot every person and not get caught once with your silenced pistol, or you can just go balls to the wall, pull out your M4 and just start spraying. You know, you won't be accurate at all, but hey, it'll be a little bit more fun. Fucking jump around with a weirdly smooth dive roll animation, you know? Or you can like pull out your taser, tase someone until they literally fucking catch on fire. This game had like a weird sense of freedom that only immersive sims was pulling off back in the day. It was just huge semi-linear levels where they just throw you in there and say, hey, you know, go have fun, do it how you want to do it, just as long as you get from point A to point B. You know, if you can get past the 25-year-old controls, you know, wiggly textures, and awkward movement, Siphon Filter is a romp to play. It was a glimpse into where the gaming industry was headed, with its smoothish gameplay, advanced graphics, and third-person action. But Siphon Filter wasn't alone in its innovative game design, because the PS1 was just brimming with brand new creative studios with fresh ideas that are sadly just lost to the sands of time now. Psygnosis, you know, the studio we now know as Liverpool, they were just on some fucking Adderall back then, pumping out banger after banger. They made G-Police, Colony Wars, Wipeout. Same thing with Japan Studio, which was a heavy hitter back in the PS1 era. They were chefing up classics like Ape Escape, which revolutionized using the analog sticks. And then there was The Legend of Dragoon, you know, a fantastic classic RPG that fans have been clamoring for years. Believe it or not, you know, Sony owns all of these games that are just lying dormant. We just went through a fuck ton of titles. And if there's one thing clear about this video, they've got a peculiar number of franchises that have just been completely abandoned. Games that were plastered on the box as selling points are now just collecting dust on old consoles. Xbox still has Halo and Gears going after like 20 years because they know their fans love that franchise. With Xbox and Nintendo, the game series that don't continue usually have a pretty good reason why. But honestly, therein lies the secret to Sony's wildly successful business model. They've always pushed forward and left the past alone. Clearly, as we can see from the myriad of games I've listed off, with no hope of coming back. They've never really pulled from the well of old titles, because they're a publisher built on innovation. At least that's what I thought. Until I started to analyze the landscape of the console post PS4, where now they're just milking the same games over and over again, and frankly, we don't want them anymore. Historically, Sony has moved forward, but in this generation, it seems like they're resting on their laurels and remastering old games, but for all the wrong reasons. Here's the crux of the problem, right? It's not that they're remastering old games, because, you know, I want remasters, I want remakes, but they're remastering old games that are not only playable on modern hardware, but run and look beautifully on them, and are less than 10 years old. Meanwhile, some of their most important IP like Resistance and Killzone is just stranded on the PS3 without an ounce of attention given to it. I mean, for the love of God, there's been more The Last of Us games that are just remasters than there are games of the entire Resistance franchise. That's not just a problem with Sony. That's a state of emergency. Pre-PS5, Sony was at the forefront of console innovation. From the brave new landscape of the PS1,
the Sony PlayStation,
the Y2K punk rock horror edgelord aesthetic of the PS2, the boundary pushing too big for your britches ideals of the PS3, to the cinematic masterpieces of the PS4 and beyond. Every era of Sony is vastly different. Now it seems like their best studios are just relegated to making the same things in the same games over and over again, sucking the life out of them and abandoning the fun that the console used to be all about. But here's the thing, right? Sony is weird because they take one step forward, right? They'll remaster Freedom Wars and Legacy of Kain like we just saw in the most recent State of Play. But then they'll take 2 steps back by remastering Horizon, and there's even rumors of a fucking Days Gone remastered. When we were at the tail end of the PS4 generation, I was enamored with what the PS5 was going to offer, man. I mean, we were going to get even bigger and better games than the ones we got on PS4. We were going to get a steady 4K 60 FPS. It seems like gaming was going to take another huge leap. Well, almost 5 years in, and it seems like we're just reliving the glory days of the PS4. PS5 is just fucking, Uncle Rico watching his football tapes back and remastering the same games that sold really well and had critical success already.
So what do you think?
It's like the culture of the brand has completely shifted to just complacency and greed. Naughty Dog making the Last of Us games 6 times in the last 10 years does nothing for the brand, except make them look like the company that milks their only successful product and completely ignores their fans begging and pleading for something either new or a massive return to form. I mean, I'm not saying go out and fucking remake some shitty IPs, fucking take Cyberdeck from the PS1, give it a $200 million budget. No, I'm not saying that. But just have some self-awareness. Horizon Remastered is the laughing stock of the fucking game industry, bro. No one wants it. No one cares about it. Why are you doing it? Just so you can squeeze an extra $10 out of us? Like, come on. It's not about the money because I'm not going to buy the game. It's just an opportunity cost. All the time you spent remaking Horizon, you could have been remaking fucking Siphon Filter or something. I mean, who's to say you can't split off a portion of studios to make like remakes and remasters and shit? Or even create new studios designed specifically to make games of that IP. 313 does it with Halo, the Coalition does it with Gears. Why can't you guys do it? You've got a master of remakes in Blue Point just sitting there, just waiting to do something. Why not give them a fucking Resistance remake? Or a Bloodborne remaster, which fans have been fucking crying about for the last 5 years. But no, we're just gonna keep reliving the old glory days of the PS4. We're gonna keep making Horizon Dawn remastered and The Last of Us 1 Part 7 remake remastered, the joint. Because we know you're going to pay fucking $70 for it and you're going to like it. It just feels like the brand went completely hollow. It's honestly kind of disrespectful to your player base. Look at all these great games on PlayStation Plus Premium catalog that haven't even been thought about in 15 years. That would sell like fucking hotcakes just seeing your new games get remastered over and over again. It seems like a fundamental misunderstanding of the PlayStation brand from management. Herman Hulst is a Guerrilla alumni and is pushing Horizon like there's no tomorrow, despite most Sony fans being indifferent towards it. And the CFO of Sony going on record and saying they don't have enough original IP is just straight up tone deaf, because I've given over a dozen examples in this video. I used to think Sony's MO was creating new innovative games, fostering new audiences, and dropping the ones it doesn't need, because it was pre-PS4. Now it just seems like a conceited, greedy company that's determined to suck the money out of all its fans' pockets and not give us anything we actually want. While other companies are remaking their best IPs, Sony is just milking the same games for full price. We'll see if it's just an industry trend that Sony is partaking in, or the start of a dangerous business practice of complacency for a publisher and console manufacturer that virtually has no competition at this point. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.